T-minus 3, 2, 1, 0.
Hello, my friends. This is part 2 of episode 72 with Morphologis, where we're reviewing the CitizenCon event that happened just this weekend. In this episode, we'll be talking about things like the resource management system, the new skill system coming to players, EVA 2.0, and more. If you missed the other one, there's plenty of conversation there about the new planets, missions, and other gameplay initiatives that they're doing, but to be honest, this is the more interesting half, so I hope you enjoy it. Going on to what I think was the biggest panel of the whole show, the power play panel, showing off a little more resource management and those systems that will ultimately force us into multi-crew gameplay and make it so that we need to start considering more than just how fast we can get from one place to another. I don't know about you, but in my own chat, there were a lot of negative responses to this. To the
I don't understand why. This is what they've been talking about doing for a long time. Are they just new to Star Citizen?
I think a lot of people aren't. I don't know, because there's a lot of people talk about this during the monthly reports. We've talked about it in ISC a couple times. We've seen that there are components that can be changed out. I think there's just a lot of people who still don't fully understand what this game is going for.
Yeah, I think that's what it is. I think there's just there's a breakdown of communication over the many years that this has been under development. Because I remember Chris having talking about this in keynotes and in ISCs. They've been talking about these types of systems literally since the beginning. This is just the first time that we're starting to actually see something real as opposed to just talk.
Yeah.
So I'm excited, man. I got, after looking over it again, I even got more information out of it. I think it's a lot more impactful than it maybe seemed watching the presentation the first time around.
Yeah.
And I can share that with you. I think it's definitely worth discussion.
Yeah, let's get into it.
One of the things, and this kind of also ties into the new flight model changes as well. So multi-crew ships, first of all, have for the longest time not been ships that are really used in combat because their range is limited, they're slow, they're vulnerable, they get blown up by pretty much anything that can kite them, which is everything. So you don't see a lot of hammerheads or bigger in combat because they die very easily. They're just not useful ships. If someone takes it out, it's because they kind of want to RP a little bit. They want to have fun with it, right?
Yeah.
But it's not a terribly useful ship. You can kite it so easily. And I had this exact same experience in a big furball during the last Ninetales event. Ninetales not lockdown. There was 100 people fighting. It was a huge space battle. We were in a hammerhead, and everybody was kiting us. So it was impossible to really enjoy using that ship. So I'm glad that this new combat system is going to make those types of ships useful, but now they also need to make those ships more interesting to use, because just gunning isn't very interesting as part of multi-crew combat, right?
Yeah.
So this new power management system, they talked about item maintenance, so items having to be maintained and having durability, power management, which can help you overpower certain items on your ship to get more efficiency out of them, so you can make your ship power management. They talked about how you can reroute power and overpower certain devices to get more efficiency out of them. So kind of similar to what we had before with overclocking, but now with lots of different types of components. Downside being, of course, that you need to maintain them more. They can be damaged from being overheated. Life support. This is the big one, though. The life support bit, it seemed like it's going to really, really affect the way that we have combat in Star Citizen. The things that stuck out to me were the oxygen supplies starting to matter. So not having oxygen on your ship has never mattered in the past because we just keep our suits on. Nobody takes their suits off.
You could literally open the door, just fly around in space with your doors open.
Yeah, it's just what was that clearly is going to be changing. It seems like our suits are going to have a lot more limited oxygen supplies, and then we're going to have to rely on our ship's oxygen supply to stay alive during combat, which I think is a good change. It does make it feel more important, more tangible, the world. The other thing, though, is that they talked about then pressurization and depressurization, how you can die from the oxygen being depressurized from a place, and how you can control different rooms in your ship and depressurize them. But they also talked about a temperature, which I thought was interesting. So, for example, if the life support goes down and it gets very cold inside your ship, you might still have oxygen, but you'll start freezing. And if you've ever been on a cold planet, you know what happens is that you only last for about 9 minutes or less on a very cold planet. So on a very cold ship, it seems like you'll have then a very limited amount of time to get that life support back up again before you die. Your ship might be fully operational, but because life support has been targeted and put down, everybody on the ship might die, which is a very interesting part of I think ship combat, because now you might see people specifically targeting that to disable your ship and make you slow down without having to blow you up.
Yeah.
And then they also talked about like getting too hot too. So a fire will actually raise, they showed this working in engine, raise the temperature of a space and has the opposite effect. You might actually overheat to death before your ship goes down, unless you put the fire out.
And they've they've also shown that those fires can take up the oxygen too.
Yeah, and the fire takes up the oxygen as well and could suffocate you. So I thought that was really, really interesting. And then, of course, you've got stuff like gravity too. Gravity control, gravity can go off, and then you're floating around. What does that do for inertia and inertial dampening? I don't know yet. They didn't talk about that. That could be interesting. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of cool stuff. The relay stuff as well, like how you route power after your ship's been damaged, creates gameplay for people who are interested in engineering, like having to be conscious about how you reroute things, what things you repair. Those are really cool things. It does seem like there's a lot of interesting gameplay coming to multi-crew ships.
Yeah,
soon.
And this is going to be a big kick, I think, to people who have been playing in large ships by themselves. That's what a lot of the complaints were saying were, hey, does this mean I can't just like solo my constellation anymore? It doesn't necessarily mean that you can't. It just means you're going to be very busy or very inefficient. And
yeah, and they did talk about going back to the ship combat. They talked about ships like the Constellation. It was specifically on the screen, I recall, when they talked about this, having more of a role in combat. They talk about light having the role of 1v1 combat and being more about positioning. Heavies being more about group battles. Mediums being more about multi-role roles where they can kind of do light combat or heavy combat. They can kind of go flex in between. And then they talk about large ships having more of a naval style of combat. And that means that they probably turn slowly and that you rely on your turrets and your crew to be able to use them effectively. So it does seem like ships like the Connie, I'm not so sure about if the Connie should be this way. It does seem to me kind of like an in-between large ship, will be slower and more reliant on multi-crew stuff, which I think is fine. I'm personally, and they said this too, I'm personally in the camp where I don't want it to be where you buy a big, expensive, large ship and you're just better than everybody else objectively because you have a bigger ship and you paid more money. I'd like there to be give and takes, rock, paper, scissors, ups and downs for certain things. If you want to fly a big ship, it's really powerful, but you need a crew. You need a group of people to play with you to make it effective.
Yeah.
So
for that reason, I think this is one of the most crucial features in the game. That's such an important part of this game. They need to level the playing field as much as they can because people have been buying ships. And, there's no winning in the game. Sure, you jump in with a small ship. You're not technically at a disadvantage because the big ships are not the goal of the game. But they got to make sure that people who are jumping into the game feels like there's more of a barrier to flying those ships than just shelling out a bunch of money. You got to have good game knowledge. You got to have the ability to get a crew, and you got to have the ability to lead a crew in order to make that happen. And I think everybody can recognize that money is not how you become a good leader. And
see, the problem is though, and and we're inevitably going to face this, and there's going to be a lot of hate in the comment section regarding this from those types of people. There is a contingent of the community that looks at the game as a pay for convenience or pay to win system. I mean, the gaming world has now shifted to a place where it originally began as something that people frowned on very heavily and criticized to being accepted. You look a lot like at you look at what's that new game by Diablo, right? You look at Diablo Immortal and Diablo 4, and a lot of people are complaining about it, but a lot of people are just playing that game.
Yeah.
They're just, I mean, I know people hate it vocally, but there are a lot more people playing it than people saying they hate it.
Yeah.
So they're definitely, the majority of the people are not speaking with their wallet. It seems to be acceptable. Now, pay to win has now become acceptable. And I think that there are people out there who expect to have a clear advantage from buying very expensive ships. And CIG will face a dilemma. Do they cater to those people and perhaps attract more whales to spend lots of money to be powerful? Or do they try to make the experience more fair, like a traditional MMO? It seems to me that Chris and the rest of the crew have erred towards making it more fair, like a traditional game. They do seem much more like traditional developers, but who knows? We'll have to see. I hope personally that it's more fair. And, you know, I'm coming from a place where I can afford to buy everything, and I have pretty much every ship in the game. But I still want the person who just started off to at least have a fighting chance, you know, to be able to participate in combat and be competitive.
Yeah. I believe that the people who have spent the most time in the game shouldn't be getting an upper hand because they've got the experience to back them up already. And I'll get more into that when we talk about the skills discussion later. But I
mean, I don't know about that, though. I mean, I think that's different. I think if you spent a lot of time in the game, I think rewarding those players with some kind of perk for having played a lot is fine. I just don't like the idea that we're bringing in wealth inequality into the gameplay space. Where,
that's fair.
Because I'm very, very wealthy in the real world, I can buy a clear advantage over you, and you're just always going to suck. You're never going to be as good as me because you can't afford to spend $100,000 on the game, which is what's in Diablo 4. So, yeah, I just would hate to see that kind of system in Star Citizen.
That's fair. That is, it's more of a money conversation. I was getting ahead of myself, but yeah, I like that this is something that can help to balance out the way that big ships function in the game, and it's been a big part of the game. Did you notice also the negative reaction to this at all from others that you've spoken to or seen talk about it, or were most people kind of on board with knowing that this was going to be a thing?
Honestly, ever since what happened a couple weeks ago and my Twitter post, even more so, I've kind of disconnected from the community, and I'm not even reading comments or reactions. So I don't know what people's reactions are. I can guess, but honestly, I just need to get out. I just need to get away from that space because it's been very toxic towards me, and it's affected my mental health, and I just need to take some time away from it. So
yeah, I get that. It can't be fun to jump into a thread to read about something not related to you and see comments about you for no. I've seen it. I've literally been. I've looked at threads about things that had nothing to do with any of that, and it somehow ends up coming back to you. I'm sorry about that, dude. I mean,
I saw another one where there was a guy saying how they were at Bar Citizen, and was the topic of conversation, and everyone was laughing at me. I was like, wow, this is the community, man. So I'm just kind of done with engaging with the community, unless it's people that I know in my personal community. I'm distancing myself from them. I don't know when I'll come back, but we'll have to see.
Sorry to hear that, dude.
It's all good. It is what it is. People show their true colors. You just know the type of people that you want to interact with, and you don't. You know, one thing that I think I've learned from this is, like, now I kind of understand why people, like very famous people, I'm not saying that I'm very famous, but
famous Morph.
You know, I understand why, like, very, very well-known people don't interact with their fan base, because it is mentally taxing. Even though it's a few people, they're very vocal and there's a lot of them. It can be mentally draining to have to deal with that.
Yeah, and I think the thing that's generally missed by most people is not that you expect to be treated specially or forgiven for opinions that others don't agree with or anything like that. It's just the fact that when you do something, there's a lot more focus on how you do it and why you do it, as opposed to when other people might do it. Generally, that stuff is focused on for a couple minutes maybe, or in that moment of that conversation, but it doesn't stick around like gum on the bottom of a table. Like it keeps coming up over and over and over and over weeks later. That just doesn't happen to most people, and it can get emotionally draining.
Yeah, it's been popping up everywhere in unrelated conversations. So yeah.
Well,
anyway.
Well, I think that this is a change. The resource management is a great thing to see coming to the game. I'm excited to see how it goes. The one thing I think I'm worried about with it is the fact that it probably will only come to the Hammerhead and the Hull A when it first comes into the game. And they'll have to continue to kind of rework ships and systems to make them work in other ships. But I'm hoping maybe you have a different opinion on that to shine a little more light on my expectations, because that could take a while.
For what? Sorry, which subject?
For the resource management, the power systems and all of that. Yeah. Do you think that they'll have to go back through each ship and do them like they are with the Hammerhead? Or do you think that there's an easier way?
No, they have to. They have to go. They've said as much. I mean, the Hammerhead's going to be the Hammerhead, the Hull. What was it? The
Hull A,
Hull C, and the Hull A, and then there was one other ship.
Oh, they think they talked about the what's the other one? The shooty one.
I thought they said the MSR.
I think they said it was the what is it? Starfighter?
Ares Starfighter?
Yeah, I thought they said it was the Ares. They were preparing for it. If it's the MSR, that's great, because I've got one of those. But
I think they said that was the MSR. I mean, because it seems like, I don't know why it would be the Starfighter. Starfighter doesn't have an interior, so it wouldn't seem like to me it'd be a good initial test bed for that tech, because it's there's nothing to run around and plug and unplug with. So, well, maybe I'm wrong. I don't know. I'll have to go back and look at that conversation.
Yeah, I don't remember.
I don't know if it's really that important. I'm not sure how really important it is, though, to be honest. I mean, just having a few test beds to see how it works, I think it's fine. And then that'll inform how they do the rest of their ships to see if the system is working or not.
Yeah.
And ultimately, there are only a handful of ships that really, I mean, you really need to do to test it out with to use in combat. Because, I mean, even the MSR is not a very combat-oriented ship. So, so we'll have to see.
It's going to be a long-term thing, though. Definitely expect this feature to be a long rollout, not something that we're just going to see pop into the game and start making a difference. It'll be one of those things that's like, okay, it's in the game, alpha implementation, it's working in one model. Now we'll slowly see it trickle to other ships.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
So I
think that's what it's going to be.
Yeah. So the last official panel of the show was just talking about ships. Straight to flyable ships, new concepts, upcoming ships. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, gotta shill, right? There's gotta be one shilling portion of the presentation. I mean, to be fair and to be honest, I thought that the Spirit was really beautiful. I bought all of them. I very, 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 very rarely buy concept ships. I kind of have a rule where it has to be real so that I can make a video on it. But I just really like the Spirit, and I bought it. I bought all of them.
Wow.
Yeah, I know, it's weird. And I even bought the little Jeep. I know it's not a Jeep, but it looks like a Jeep. Yeah, a little STV. It's so cool.
The Spirit is gosh, honestly one of the best looking ships I think they've made for this game. And I've said that several times in the last couple of years. They've gotten very good. I'm going to wait for it to come to game before I think
that is the financially wise decision to make. I do not recommend buying concept ships or even just buying ships. You can earn this stuff in game, but as a content creator whose purchases are funded by the work that I do, I can kind of make, financial sense out of making those purchases. Just it's not realistic for most anybody else though. So
yeah, I never buy the ships anymore. I won't be buying it, but I'm going to wait until it's in game before I judge it, because you know what happened with the MSR. And I think everybody is expecting this one to go through a better process than the MSR. They've gotten better at designing the ships and concepting them out based more on their realistic dimensions. But I want to
Yeah.
see how this ship translates into game, because it is gorgeous. It's like a little mini Normandy, beautiful looking thing. The C1 is
Yeah.
I would love it. But
They had a lot of, to be fair, okay, so like I would not say that the Spirit is the most sexy concept that they've ever done. I mean, I remember the original Carrack concept was so sexy, and there's a lot of, in the original MSR concept was beautiful. The thing is though, like back then they didn't have all of the metrics done yet. They didn't have the metrics for the landing pads or the hangars or the modules, and now that stuff is pinned down. So as you say, yeah, like now they can do concepts where they can make them look like the concept, as opposed to like making the concept but it's really fat, which is what happens to the MSR
Chonker.
and the Carrack. Yeah, they became chonkers, man. They got vertically so chonky. Just because they couldn't fit the stuff in there. They couldn't fit them in the hangars, and they couldn't fit all the stuff that they originally planned because they didn't have those metrics figured out yet. This one, they had a concept model that they rotated around, and it seemed like they had probably put all of the modules in it and made sure that all the spaces work. And actually, having spoken with some of the ship team, I know that that's how they work. They now like they figure out where everything fits while they're doing the concepting, so that they don't end up with something that they can't make. Which is a better way to go about it. It's a more refined way to go about it.
Solid.
I think she's gonna look exactly that way, man. I
hope
bet
so.
on it.
It's a great looking ship. Crusader has such a great design language. It really got that, like, I don't want to call it high sci-fi, but like that very, gosh, I don't know how to describe it. It reminds me of the Turians from Mass Effect. That's kind of what the Crusader stuff looks like.
I thought the Normandy immediately when I saw the concept art. I mean, it's a completely different scale, but I was like, damn, Normandy's a beautiful ship. It's obviously different. You know, there's only so many different variations of a ship that you can make in a sci-fi before you start making ships that look similar to one another.
Yeah.
But it still has that unique, I think, Crusader look with the canopy, with the engines, the angle of it, and I love the VTOLs that look like the A2. I like they pulled that from there. I think it's a really successful moment from the A2 or the C1 or the Starlifter series.
Yeah.
You know, just wonderful.
And even the way that the materials kind of almost bend off of the chassis of the ship, they kind of make these aerodynamic sort of fins that come out. You see that across that with the Starlifter, the Star Runner. I really love how they fit those subtleties in to make them look similar.
Yeah, now I'm starting to feel weird talking about a concept ship. I never talk about concept ships, but this one is just so exceptionally beautiful that I couldn't resist. Anyway.
The STV is another ground vehicle. They're clearly focusing a lot on ground vehicles more now than they used to. Do you think that's pointing towards more ground gameplay, or are they just trying to fill that section out for whatever reason?
I think they're trying to fill that section out. But let's not forget that they promoted the vehicle along with Atmo Esports. I think that they're directly addressing a need of part of the community, which is great. Personally, I don't participate in the Atmo Esports buggy competitions. A lot of people do, and they love it. And it's great that they're getting something. Same with like the racing community. I know they talked about Lorville having specific, designs in it for creating racetracks, and how parts of Pyro had specific designs to create racetracks. I love that they're doing that, man. It gives some part of the community a place to do their gameplay. So I bought one. I think it's fun. I think it looks like a great little thing to throw on my freelancer or something while I want to do a mission with a friend or by myself. So I like it. I mean, I think it's great. It's great to have more options. I love the reconcepting of the PTV. It looks a lot better now. I like the consistency of the design language. So yeah, just great. It's not like it's not like a big capital ship that wows everybody, but it's a fun little thing that I think anybody could buy in game. It's probably going to be, and that's another thing, wait to buy it. I'm positive this thing is going to be like 20, 30,000 AUEC to buy in game.
Yeah, it'll be very cheap.
It's going to be super cheap. You'll be able to do a mission and buy it. So
you make a good point that it's pointing towards some of the gameplay they're doing, almost like they are slowly building up the racing gameplay kind of stealthily. They're not making big releases that push it forward, like bounty hunting V2 or the hull scraping that's coming in. But slowly and surely, the racing stuff is kind of trickling in the background, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I think that's great. I love I love that CIG is getting so involved with elements of the community like that.
Yeah.
And giving them things to do.
Now let's see that more with cargo, please. Thank you.
Yes.
How about the Corsair? Any new thoughts on that? We've seen a lot of that, but any updated opinions?
It looks more finished. I have to get it in my hands to make an evaluation. It looks really good, man. I don't own one. I don't know if I'll buy one because I don't know if it's for me. I already have a lot of ships, and I have to ask myself, am I really going to fly? But I definitely will review it. I'm definitely interested in taking a look at it. It's very cool.
It is definitely. I'm excited for the architect reviews of that one. One of my historically favorite ships. So interested to see what you say about it.
It is really cool. I might, after using it, change my mind and just buy one. It probably will end up what happens, because it does seem like a nice size for a small group of people to play together with. So we'll just have to see.
Pick one up in game. Sure, you're like a millionaire or something.
Do that.
You could shell out a couple credits for that. All right, moving on to the last bit of CitizenCon, the part that wasn't officially announced beforehand, and the part that they I'm not gonna lie, it was very funny. Just how this played out. I ultimately think that they could have done a lot better in terms of how they shared the information during CitizenCon. And this last segment, this last segment was gave us a lot of good information. But man, it was just so funny how they were like, "Yeah, we've got this surprise for you," and then Chris and Rich came out and just like talked for like 20 minutes straight before we actually saw anything, and people were like, What's the actual surprise here? That was
the surprise. That was Jared said that was the surprise.
But
it was in our chat.
It would be a good surprise. Like, the things they showed were surprising. I didn't expect to see a new Moby glass or a new EVA or anything like that. Just the way they did it was like,
right. It was the format. So like everything up was polished and concise leading up to that point, and then it just went into this very long conversation with Chris
in circles.
And who was the other gentleman there?
Richard Tyre.
Terrible names. Richard's like he's amazing. He's very much like Chris. Like, he can just continually talk on gameplay systems. He's got a lot of authority at CIG for making those kinds of decisions. So it's great to hear them talk about these things. The only thing is that when you get those two types of people in a room together, they're bad enough individually because they can just keep talking, but together they'll just keep bouncing off of each other forever. And in any other situation, it would have been amazing. If it was released as an individual talk on a Friday is the only thing that we got, I would digest the hell out of that.
Oh, that would have been a great Star Citizen Live.
It'd have been a great Star Citizen Live. It would have been maybe the best Star Citizen Live of the entire year, hands down. Chris and Richard Tyre talking like that would have been amazing. But at the end of a CitizenCon, and it was already a really long day, it just was like a little bit too long-winded. The stuff that they had to say, though, was really interesting. They had a lot of good stuff to talk about, and I think there's stuff to have a conversation here about. So where do you want to start, man? They said a lot of good stuff.
Oh boy,
in the end there. It was just really spread out over 2 hours.
Well, I really want to start with the skills thing, but let's
start with the biggest thing they
with
dropped on us, right? The skills thing. But go ahead, whatever you want to start with, man.
Let's start with
you're the
EVA.
captain of the ship.
Let's start with the EVA stuff, because that's a honestly, them showing us EVA V2, I expected it to be different. I expected it to be better. I was not expecting completely changed up animations. I was not expecting essentially a new way to travel. It felt like that addition added a lot more character to Star Citizen.
It adds so much more polish to the way it looks. It felt like sometimes you don't know. I found in working in architecture, sometimes you don't know what the right design is until you see it. And when you see it, you think it shouldn't have been any other way. This is the way it should be. You don't know what you need until you see it in a lot of cases. And this, I think, EVA animation, once you see it, you're like, oh yeah, of course. This is how they were EVAing in The Expanse too. Like, it feels realistic. It feels immersive and cool. And it's a small thing, mechanically, you're still traveling through space from one location to another. but it does add that level of interaction with the world, that level of tangibility where you can grab onto things and move around, that it just makes it feel like it's maybe a little bit more dangerous and mysterious,
Yeah.
especially how they were talking about with this system, they're removing or they're adding jet fuel to your suit, and certain suits won't have the ability to EVA with like nozzles. So you will have to rely on moving yourself across and then taking that leap of faith where you just try to angle yourself perfectly and coast towards the next point to grab onto. Imagine the tension that's going to add in a situation where you're EVAing without fuel
Yeah.
or without an EVA suit. That's going to be intense.
That's a new form of racing right there. Like you're off with some friends on the outside of your Idris, and you get out together and you're like, hey, let's just race from one end to the other and see who gets there first. Like it's one of those things that's not a game changing necessarily addition, but it can change your gameplay at so many different levels. I mean, we're talking new puzzles, new ways of getting around derelict ships, new ways of repairing your own ship. The idea
combat
that you can
changes too.
Yeah.
In zero G.
Yep. Zero G combat.
You're going to be like a little profile looking at somebody above you. It's going to be a completely different kind of experience.
And for those who didn't know, they did kind of tease it during the event, but Sadaball has been a very, very long sought after game in lore that essentially plays out like how Ender's Games competitions did, where you have this sort of zero G arena where you're dodging between shapes and trying to get to the other side. This seems like a great first step towards actually having that be a reality too.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot more possibilities with this. I think it's a small thing, but a big thing.
Yeah.
And to kind of segue, I think it's also important to talk about another thing they mentioned in the same conversation is about how you go through spaces using ladders and mantling. I think all of this could be lumped together in just overall movement polish. Movement polish in EVA, movement polish in gravity spaces. It just makes the whole game feel like a AAA game. It feels more fluid, more intuitive. The way that they showed how you get up onto different platforms is a much more natural way. How you can grab onto ledges as you fall past them.
Yeah.
It just feels like oh yeah, of course, that's what you could do. That's what you would do if you were there in that space. It no longer feels frustrating. Like I know that I could get over there if it were real, if it were the real world, but I can't because there's not a mechanic to allow me to do that. But now there is. So I think that's great. I'm glad that we're finally seeing this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And I'm excited to get it in our hands. I don't think it's going to feel clunky anymore.
It feels up to date. Like I'm playing a game that's in at least 2015, like like you said, this game's always felt so clunky. Honestly, one of the worst parts of this game for me has been moving around. The player models feel very light, whether you're in an undersuit or heavy suit. You just feel light, like you don't actually have any weight to you. The movements feel too fast and with not enough weight behind them. You can't clamber up this area, but you can jump up that one. It's all felt very clunky. You're right about that. And this seems like something that will update the feel of the game to feel a little bit more in line with a more quality experience. A question I do have though is, do you think that, because he didn't mention when he was talking about EVA, talked about how it didn't need markup with the grabby hands kind of getting you sort of stabilizing you as you came into contact with the surface, but they didn't mention that when it came to the clambering and stuff. And I did notice that the edges were slightly different colored from the rest of the platforms. Do you think that that's going to be a systemic sort of thing, or do you think we'll still have to be specific where we jump to?
I'm 99, maybe 98.9% sure that it's going to be systemic, because that is the word of the day from them. They kept talking about systemic. And I think that the system that they employed in Caves is a perfect example of why it needs to be systemic. Them using specifically marked up areas for mantling is frustrating. Because as a player who doesn't understand that system, or who even does, because I know how that system's supposed to work, a lot of the time it doesn't even work. Like you're looking at it, you're jumping against the wall and trying to get it, just feels so dumb and clunky. And not at all like a AAA title. It feels like an indie game. So I think it's going to be systemic, and if not, it has to be, because Other games do it. Cyberpunk does it, for example. They have systemic mantling over everything. I know it's not been placed because you can do it in places you're clearly not supposed to go to, like up on the tops of roofs, like very, very far up. So, yeah, I think so.
That would be very nice.
that way.
Do you think they were trying not to do that before? Do you think they were trying to go with just marked up, or do you think that was placeholder?
I think it might have been something that they were unsure of, or they didn't have time to do, like so many things in this game.
Yeah.
They want to get it done. They don't have the time to make it systemic, so they put in a placeholder or they put in a stopgap, and yeah. So.
Okay, well, that's new movement controls. Very gosh, such a just.
It's a small thing, but a big thing. Man.
It's not
the world.
It's not sexy. You don't have to make a whole panel for that, but gosh, knowing that is something that's at least close to being true, makes me feel better about Squadron 42, definitely, but also makes me feel better about the PU for sure.
Definitely.
Another thing Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. No, you're the one leading this, man. Sorry, I keep taking over.
No,
go
please.
ahead.
I want to know what you want
to.
What did you want to do next? Let's go.
They also I didn't want to forget about AI. They talked about the AI too.
Yes,
improving that. They were. Chris was like really honest about it. He's like he knows that it doesn't work. They're all aware that it doesn't work, and they're very frustrated with that. And so they said. They kind of said something extreme that I think set off a lot of people. They said they scrapped it, but which isn't exactly true. They didn't scrap it. They kind of started over in some sense, in some of the ways, not in all of the ways the AI works, to make it more believable. And the demonstrations that they showed were much better looking with the different types of AI. It just kind of made them move in ways that were believable. And I really liked the way that they showed the stealth gameplay. Because one thing that other games often do is that the AI are kind of stupid. Like they can see you for a second and they won't react. Like there's like a meter for them to react.
Yeah.
And then after a certain time, they'll forget you. It's like, oh, it's just a rat. Of course not. Like if they were a real person, they'd be like, that's not a rat. There are no rats on the space station. There's definitely a guy there. Let's go find this guy.
Yeah, that always annoys me. They're just like, oh, okay, my friend ended up dead, but I guess whatever.
Whatever. It's
natural
whatever.
causes.
It seems like in this game that there are going to be real consequences to being seen. Like the one thing that they showed were either the one part where they showed where they were in the Aceto station again, where he got spotted by the two patrol guys. They kept searching and they didn't stop searching. Because they saw him. And I like that. That was good. That's realistic. It means that if you're not careful, you're going to get found. And so you're constantly going to be on your toes trying to escape them. And the way how they systematically and very thoroughly searched every nook and cranny was, again, very realistic. And so I think in other games, being stealthy has been very easy and therefore kind of dull. You're kind of almost pretending to yourself that you're being a ninja, when in reality, you make lots of mistakes and you're just you get away with it.
Yeah.
So
yeah, they're very nice to you.
Yeah.
It's also great, like you said, that I guess the best thing that I think they showed was exactly as you said. They'll see you, but they won't just go back and forget you right away. They won't even if you're gone for 10 minutes, they'll still not forget about you. They'll still be kind of more on alert, which is really nice. But going to sort of the overall aspect of this AI kind of rework that they're talking about, we kept reading a lot about AI additions in the monthly reports. Month after month after month, AI tech was just chugging away at these amazing things. And you're thinking to yourself, okay, they're talking about all this. Maybe we can't see it because of the network problems. Maybe this is something that they're only testing in Squadron 42. And then they come out and they say all this, and it just kind of, it clicks. Like, they weren't putting this into the game. They were building an entire AI format kind of and telling us about it. And now we're finally seeing where that was all going.
Right. Because I remember them talking about the different AI attributes, like the baiter. We didn't call him a baiter, but the clearly is one that baits everybody else. Like the aggressor or the cautious professional, and different levels of professionalism for the AI. And what that translated into is just like, oh, this looks like how people behave. There are people with different behaviors, and that makes them move differently.
Yeah.
Because one of the things I really liked is that if you've ever seen AI that all have the same AI, they all move exactly the same. So when they're all alerted, they all move in the exact same
They all
direction.
do that same sort of like animation.
Yeah, exactly. They all do the same thing, and so it becomes very like jarring. But we've just become used to it because that's part of games. With their different attributes, you could see that all of them reacted differently, like real people. Some of them kind of took cover, some of them went around the side, and the result is a much more believable interaction with NPCs, and therefore also a lot more of a challenging experience because they're all doing something slightly unpredictable. That you like once you know the AI in a game, you can be like, all right, well, I know what they're gonna do. I'm gonna anticipate them and I'm gonna get them. It becomes easy. But with the AI that they're showing, it does seem like you're gonna have to be a bit more cautious because some of them might push you, some of them might be cautious, some of them might try to flank you, and that's exciting. That's exciting. It makes me a lot more excited to play the game. It makes it feel a lot more, I guess, unique and AAA and beyond what we've, because what I was hoping to see out of Squadron 42 is something that's at least beyond what we've seen in the past. Something that does seem like it's cutting edge and pushing the envelope. And this does feel that way. This does feel that way.
Yeah, it feels like a good AI system, and they didn't even show us things like the firing tokens they've talked about or the perception. They showed us a little bit of perception stuff. They showed the way that they are able to clear out rooms together, but there's still a lot more AI attributes and things that they've talked about that we didn't get to see here. So I'm excited to see where they go with the AI. I do hope that they get it into a good point for Squadron 42, and eventually we are able to see it start running a lot better in Star Citizen, hoping in the next year or two. But
one thing I really loved is that, I don't know if you noticed, like their vent searching animation was really good. Like they got down and they looked around like this and they like peeked their head in and stuff, like realistic. In the monthly reports, I remember they also talked about how they added animations for searching around boxes and they fixed like the transitions between them to be more smooth. So you can imagine a guy grabbing a box and then looking around it realistically with his head instead of moving his body around it.
Yeah.
Those little things, those little details just makes the world feel much more alive and real.
Definitely.
So, very cool.
I love that. All right, so the next bit that they talked about, I'm saving the best for last. So the next bit is the Moby glass.
Moby glass, and I guess you would lop the mini map into that too, right? Because it does seem like the mini map is accessed through the Moby glass.
Yeah. So the mini map and the Moby glass were very interesting to see. Both, first of all, the Moby glass itself was very Squadron 42 focused, we could tell. So not exactly how it'll look on the PU.
We don't have that right now. I hope they post it. But I think it had even like missions from Squadron 42 listed on it and stuff. There were a lot of like little bits and pieces, little Easter eggs on there too from that Moby glass. So I'm eager to take a peek at that and see what we could glean from the Moby glass. But it did seem, some people did note, I did see this feedback, that it did seem much like what we have now, just more polished. With the exception, I would say, I would personally say, of that 3D model of the ship, which I thought was really nice and polished looking. So, I mean, I think it looked good.
Honestly, I was most excited to see a notification screen. I don't know about everybody else, but I get so tired of things popping up and then I miss hitting the bracket by like the last second. You're like, okay, I need you to send me another party invite, or like, I didn't see what that was, what happened. Like, there's nowhere to go where you can find all that stuff, and notifications seemed like a very straightforward kind of thing that you would need, but we never had it. So I love seeing that on there. Ultimately, I just like the design. I think the design looks a lot more information rich. It looks like it gives you more to play off of in terms of notifications and alerts. The graphics are a little bit better, more dense. Overall, I liked how it looked. The animation was a little weird and the double text was a little meh, but I enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think it was good. I'm sure we're going to see more iterations of that going in the future. It's building blocks, so I know that they can change that more readily. I think it's good. And the mini map then I also thought was really next gen, next level stuff. We've not seen stuff that looks like that, I think, in games before, except for like in a pre-rendered animation. To see that that's more generated from the environment that you're in is exciting, and I want to see more of that. I want to see more of how that works with non-ship spaces like caves and facilities. So
Yeah, I think I would love to hear more about it because from what I was understanding, they were just showing off the technology that would be going into the minimap. This was sort of, they were showing us the way that they are able to display ships in that fashion as opposed to just being like, okay, here's the minimap. This is what it looks like, right? That's something that would be applied to holo tables and radar or something on the ships, correct?
yeah, it does seem like that tech is going to be. It all feeds into other elements of the game, like the holo table. That's something I thought of too. Like it seems like a holo table usable feature as well to talk to your org about how you're going to raid this bunker or how you're going to raid this ship.
Yeah, so I was still trying to wrap my head around how that would translate into what the minimap would actually look like, but you're right, it looked really good, and I hope that's how it looks when we finally get it in game.
Yeah, I hope we get like an app that we can look on to do a deeper scan, and then maybe there's an HUD element somewhere on our screen that kind of shows you a little piece of it. But you're right that they didn't show that, so I'm eager to see what their concept is for how to make this integrated into the HUD in a good way and in a fluid way.
So finally, we have the last big thing that they talked about. I think probably maybe not the biggest. I think there's a chance this could be the biggest announcement they made during the whole show. And that was the introduction of sort of passive skills to players. And this is something that they've talked about adding to AI. They've mentioned that attributes are going to change the way that different AI act in the game, but now we're starting to see it applied to actual characters and ourselves. Let's start that talk off with how do you feel about that?
I think I'm actually excited for it. I think it's another way that we can make progress with our characters. I think it's also a potential way to add a penalty for willy-nilly letting yourself get killed. Obviously, right now with the bugs that we have in the game, it's frustrating and we die a lot. But I mean, it's not always going to be like that. So I like that they're thinking also about making it so you can't just ram a pad and expect there to be no consequences for your character. That there is some benefit to staying alive and doing certain activities that you like that will give you a passive role. And by the way, I will say that Seiji was in chat for our discussion afterward, and so they provided some additional information that wasn't part of the presentation that I can talk about here about what that's supposed to be. So I know that it wasn't super clear in the presentation necessarily. They didn't go into specifics about what it's supposed to be like. They said it's not supposed to be like Elden Citizen, where where you're leveling up these attributes and there's a clear advantage. All right, they specifically said
Elden
that.
Citizen.
Yeah, these are more passive attributes that you get, passive benefits to your character. So it's not going to make you like an overpowered god if you've got it, but it will create subtle, nuanced advantages to specific activities, so that you, as a player who enjoys a specific activity, one that you do a lot, are given a sort of passive reward for doing that. And I think that's a good thing. I think we need things that reward us, that encourage us to do the things that we like to do. A couple examples they gave were like a bounty hunter who like chases people down a lot will be able to maybe run a little bit faster or a little bit longer than somebody who's maybe like a overweight hauler. So who's an illegal guy, like maybe he's a criminal or something, you'll be able to catch him a little bit faster. I mean, it's more of a subtle thing. And then they also talked about like breathing in space combat, like being able to handle G's. So maybe you can handle G's for a little bit longer, to be able to get into a turn with somebody who's not so experienced with it and be able to overtake them. And I think if those are the ways that they're doing them, so long as they're not overt and in your face, and so long as they can't be paid for, I don't want to see skill books. They didn't say that there wouldn't be, but I hope to God that there won't be. Then I think it's okay. I think it could add something to the experience. I do worry though. I don't know how it's going to work exactly. I hope it doesn't end up like Tarkov, where in order to build strength, you throw 100 grenades or something like that. You cheese the system. So we'll have to see how they balance it.
Yeah, I'm not so positive about it. It feels like a drastic turn from this sort of like everything is based on the player themselves and sort of how they perceive the game and how they learn the game. And it's not so much the change itself that worries me in that regard, but just the direction and the tone that it sends. It kind of tells me that maybe that's not the rules we're playing by anymore. And I know there are some other things in the game that don't necessarily leave it all up to player skill, but for the most part, I've always imagined this game when I make videos and I talk about features and I look at the things that they're working on. I always view it through this lens of they're making this because they want players to think about what they're doing. They really want you to pay for your consequences if you don't prepare for something. Or
let me ask you this, man. How have you felt about the food system in the game?
The food system is a weird one.
Because you know that it actually you have an advantage if you eat healthier food, right?
Right.
Like your hydration, you have it longer. Like you stay hydrated longer for eating and drinking the right things.
Yeah.
Is that providing like an overly overpowered advantage over other people?
Yes, but again, that sort of plays into this idea that you've planned ahead. You've gotten the food that you think would help you the most, or you've planned for, you've brought in that stuff on your ship that you know you would be able to prepare that would give you a better meal than just eating, say, a power bar. It's not really a permanent thing. It's something that happens in the moment that you need to prepare for when you're going out on a mission. Whereas...
Right. Sorry, keep going with what you're saying then. I'm sorry.
With something like the passive skills, it's something that just, it builds up over time, and eventually, you can't forget about it. I'm sure you'll have to keep it up to date every so often. But like somebody who, like you said, runs around a lot is going to go up against somebody else who maybe just got into the game and would have run around a lot if you told them, hey, go for a mile jog before your mission and you'll be able to go into your mission and last longer chasing somebody down. They can't do that because they've only been in the game for a day.
I think it highly depends on how much of a difference these things make and where the players start off with. If you start off, like if they start off players, for example, at a base fitness level, like they just got out of the military, which is kind of what they've been talking about with Squadron 42 is like, you just got out of the military and now you're walking around the world. If that's the case and you start as a very fit person, you might start at like a moderate level where you can do everything relatively well. And it depends on what you specialize in, where your body starts to change a bit to specialize in that. So, but I get what you're saying, man. I really get what you're saying. But on the flip side of that, I think it's a positive potentially to reward people for doing the activity that they love. I think
I
don't know.
You could see this both ways. It is a positive change because it builds more progression. It builds reasons for people to care more, but it also feels like a change that goes a little bit against the philosophy of what I at least base my understanding of this game on. Now, I could be wrong with that. There are a lot of different ways to look at this game, but it does feel like a change in direction from some of the other things they've talked about in the past.
But I mean, Chris has talked about how food was going to affect your fitness. They've talked about using the bathroom. They've talked about those types of immersive elements in the game for years, but they've never talked about how that's going to work. I think this is just them finally putting a game mechanic to the way that's supposed to work. I don't know how they would do it any other way. How would fitness matter if it didn't in some way affect the way that you play the game?
In terms of fitness, I always figured with, like, say, the food system that they had or the drink system, these would be things that if you didn't do them, you might be at a small disadvantage, but for the most part, they reward you for doing them, give you buffs for eating your food, give you a buff in terms of your, I don't know, like charisma, the way that you talk to people, if you keep up with your hygiene or wear the right clothes, things that you can do in the moment to raise your chances because you know those things help. But when you start to take them and make them longer term things, that's when I think it starts to get more into the territory of, well, this person has a clear advantage over somebody else, not necessarily because they planned for it, but just because they've been playing the game and it came along for them.
Right. Well, here's the other thing I want to maybe this will assuage your concerns a bit. There's a game called Tarkov. I don't know if you've ever played it before, but they
Watched
have
it.
passive attributes.
Yeah.
They have passive attributes. At a certain point, at a high level, they do give you some advantages. You can carry more, you can run longer, you can jump higher, you can control your recoil a little bit better. Like those are all things that happen. But how it actually ends up playing out is that those passive attributes end up mattering little against the player's skill. Player knows how to position. If a player knows how to get the drop on somebody with their own skill, they're always going to win. Those passive attributes help in small ways, but it's very, very, very rare that they become a deciding factor in whether or not somebody wins a fight. So I don't think that we should automatically assume, especially with the way they're talking about it, that they are going to give people clear advantages. I think it seems more to me that there's going to be more Tarkov style where there are subtle advantages, but not in-your-face advantages where a new player cannot compete. Because a new player in Tarkov could come in with a pistol and entry-level gear with virtually nothing. They could be naked with a pistol, and they could still dome a guy and kill him instantly, wearing the most Gucci kit on the planet with all the high-level stuff. He could just die in an instant being headshot with a stupid little pistol. So as long as they do that level of balance where its skill is king, and that's what they said in the comment section while we were talking, having this discussion. Skill is going to always be the most important thing, like somebody's ability, real world ability, then I think it's okay. Because the benefits of rewarding somebody, I think, outweigh some of the downsides to it, in my opinion.
I'm
giving somebody more progression.
I'm stuck on that because if the benefits are so small that most people don't notice them, then I have trouble getting behind the idea of putting them in the game because they could add complications to the systems, new features to develop and test that might not be worth it. And if they do make a big enough
things like, running longer and being able to carry more are things that you will notice, but they aren't things that necessarily immediately offer you an advantage. I mean, maybe running longer means that you can run a mile versus 500 meters before you start feeling it. But you're not going to be running 500 meters chasing after somebody. When you see somebody, you might only be running 30 or 40 meters before you catch up to them. So those advantages will not immediately become apparent. But if that gets prolonged for a very long period of time, then it starts to become more pronounced. And then for like looting and stuff, they said that it would increase your ability to carry more weight. If you keep looting and carrying heavy stuff, you can carry more stuff. I mean, that seems something like a bit of a nice perk. You like carrying heavy stuff and you keep doing that so you can carry more loot and be a loot goblin. I like that idea. I think that's cool.
But then there's also the fact that we've already been building towards this idea of this working when it comes to things like objects. You put on a certain type of armor, you survive better in colder weather. You put on a different type of armor and you can run further. Why were these things that could have just been factored into this idea of the things you have on you, the things you have equipped, the way that you've built your armor, your ship or whatever is what gives you those small advantages? Why then do we need to rely on a skill system?
I think that it also it might also then tie into the system of consequences of Star Citizen. So what I mean is, like, for example, they've talked about drugs being a factor in Star Citizen, being able to use some of the more dangerous drugs in the universe, like Widow, and that these would give you short-term advantages, but overuse of them will cause long-term consequences to your character. So that, it's going to give you a great advantage when you're on it, but afterward you're going to be just in shambles. And I think that that's where it can start to come in play. So there are consequences to being to making poor decisions.
But then
putting yourself, yeah.
But then you say, well, the drugs were taking control of that. They had already offered this ability for, hey, you can plan ahead, bring some drugs with you that will make you run faster or carry more, and they won't necessarily be a permanent attribute, but it's something that you can do to give yourself a little bit of a hand up. But now with these skill systems, that means people would less use these drugs.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's the point. I'm like, if there's supposed to be a dangerous drug in the universe, but in reality, the effects just wear off like a buff, then it's not dangerous. It's just like a lore thing. It doesn't actually have any impact on the universe. It doesn't have any impact on you in reality. It's just, like, oh, it's a dangerous drug, but actually it doesn't do anything to me. It just makes me better. So I'll just keep taking this super dangerous drug because it's fine.
No, just nerf their health or something.
Yeah, I don't know. We'll have to see how they do it. I understand people's concerns with it, but ultimately we don't control what they do. They're going to do what they want to do. I'm trying to see some of the positives with it. I hope it's good. If it's not good, I'll complain with it along with everybody else and try to provide some like feedback for why it should be modified in some way. But it is, they're trying to add progression into the game. I'm at least excited for that. And I want to see where they go with it because it could be good. It could be good. I don't know. Yeah,
I think I have got a lot more to say about that. I'm going to think about it more and I think sit on it for a while. But there's a lot of complications with that. We've already been running plenty long, though. I think this was a really good full review of CitizenCon. Honestly, something I might be able to split into 2 episodes. But Morph, thank you so much.
Long. Holy crap.
Thank you for we went off. Thank you for chilling here and talking with me about this.
No problem.
I hope you enjoyed the talk. And I hope you enjoyed CitizenCon too. I mean, there were ups and downs, I think, but ultimately, I think it was an informative event. And do you think it did what it needed to do this year?
If it was supposed to attract new people, I don't think it did. I don't know. I don't have statistics in front of me, but I suspect it didn't. But as a backer who wanted to see where they're going, I think it did it for me. It gave me some information, at least to reinvigorate a little bit of my pessimism. Not pessimism. Reinvigorate my positivity. Make me feel a little bit more positive about where things are going.
Well, that's cool.
So yeah,
that's good. Well, we've talked today about how you do cyberpunk content, also some Star Citizen content, and I imagine there are other things you like to branch out into during your streams. If you could tell people where they might be able to find that stuff, that would be appreciated.
You can find me on YouTube at Morphologis, and same on Twitch and on Twitter and on Instagram. If you guys want to see what I'm doing in my professional life, I post a lot of images on Instagram about my current and ongoing work. So if you want to see what being an architect's like, you can check me out there.
Cool. Well, thanks again, man, for joining me for this one. This is a big show. CitizenCon 2022 is behind us. Here is to another year of development, hopefully with some of these things we've seen making it into our own hands. But again, thanks for joining me. Thank you to everybody who has watched on YouTube or is listening on their favorite audio platform. Of course, also supporters who are chilling here with us live. If you'd like, you can always support the channel and join us live to ask questions or just chat it up while we're doing this podcast. Either way, this has been the Launch Sequence Podcast, and I'll see you all next week.